Good evening, everybody. I'm David Czarnecki. I will be talking about open source tonight, how it affects you as an individual, and a little bit about how we integrate it at our company. Czarnecki D on Twitter and speak up, sure. Czarnecki D on GitHub and Twitter if you'd like to interact or ask questions about the presentation later. I work for a company called Agora Games. We're down in Troy, New York, and we build online services for video games. If you haven't heard of the company, you've probably heard of some of the titles that we work on: Guitar Hero, Call of Duty, Mortal Kombat, Saints Row, so just a few of the big titles that we work on. So talking tonight a bit about open source, and so I'd like to start off and kind of give people an idea of how one might go getting involved in open source. So kind of the path that I see of how people normally get into open source. I think everyone really starts out as a consumer of open source. So you found a project or a framework that you need to do something in your job, and so you're starting out as a consumer. There's open source libraries out there that you can adopt and bring into your work. Transition to our participant. So that might be interacting on a mailing list. It might be submitting bug fixes to a project, but in some way getting involved more than just using the software itself. You might migrate to a maintainer where you've interacted with a project, you're responsible for a particular piece of functionality or a part of a project. And then you are an evangelizer. You've been using a project or a library for a while. You're known in the community. You're telling people at meetups like this or at work, here's a great library. Here's how we could integrate it, use it in our work. And then finally, you have an itch to scratch, like Blaine did with the PR app. So you have an idea for a project or a library, so you go and create that project yourself and put it out there, and then the cycle continues for everybody who's interacting with your project. A little bit about the first open source project that I had started. Arguably, I would say it was the open source jackpot, I'll say. So it was a blog engine, and there was a package out there called Blossom, and it was written in Perl, and I was a Java programmer, and I did not want to write Perl, so I rewrote that project in Java and called it Blossom. Just a few facts about the project. I started it in February 2003, and it was mostly a solo project. I was doing this on my own. I had a few people helping out with certain features here and there, but it was mostly work that I was doing on my own. And within a year, it was adopted by Apple in their server operating system. So I had gotten a cryptic email maybe 6 or 7 months after I had started the project, asking me if I was the maintainer of the project, if I would be open to any questions or feedback, and I had replied yes, and then didn't hear anything. And then there was the press announcement from Apple during their developer conference in June, and so they had basically taken the project and bundled it as weblog server in their server operating system. So that was really a nice feather in the cap for the project. And so that night I bought a bottle of Cristal, champagne, and celebrated. If you've never had it, it's excellent. It is one of the finest champagnes I've ever had. Just a little bit about the project kind of life cycle and where it ended up. We did kind of 3 major releases. The first was flat files, really simple to get set up and get started. Really tried to focus on being simple for people to use. Then maybe 4 or 5 months later, I wanted to destroy something beautiful, to use the line from Fight Club. So I rewrote the project and kind of focused on being able to extend the project with plugins, templating to accommodate different designs. Third release, people wanted an actual database behind the blog engine. So I added that to the project and really just focused on the execution of the project. I kind of ceased everything in August 2009. The project is still out there. I still maintain a website that's more for trademark purposes. So a few things about what I learned on the project. Features are important, libraries, frameworks. People aren't going to use your project if it doesn't have a feature. They might want to contribute to it, but what your project can do is important. Bug fixes, people want to know that a project is being actively maintained, so you can't let projects go stale or not respond to issues for months at a time. Documentation, if it's easy for people to get started and actually install your library, integrate it into their project, that's a huge win. Communication, obviously, with interacting, they're not necessarily the people who are using your software, even if they're not paying, are your customers in some way. So being able to communicate with them is definitely important. Intellectual property is important. So I own the trademark for Blodsome. I worked with a patent attorney to actually go through the process of filing a trademark, getting a company set up for that. A little expensive, but it was a good learning experience of how to actually protect your intellectual property that you can still do in open source. And swag is important. I have t-shirts, I have hooded sweatshirts, stickers. So if people were contributing to the project, I could mail them a t-shirt or a sweatshirt. Just as a way to say thank you. So how can you contribute to open source, say as a developer, right? Open source work maybe now is like your resume. So LinkedIn is great, an actual physical resume is great, but as a developer, if I'm an employer, I can take a look at maybe your code on GitHub, even if it's weekend projects, and look at your test methodology, what frameworks you use, how you organize code, how you do documentation. So it's definitely important. So features are important. Again, just kind of from a personal perspective, I can contribute features to projects that I might be using or libraries that I might be using because I'm doing different things with them. I can contribute bug fixes, and that can be spelling errors in documentation. Documentation is also important. I can write addendums to READMEs or go through walkthroughs of how to integrate a particular library into a project, or maybe the use of a framework or installing it on a certain type of operating system. Developers, I would say, are traditionally not so great at non-technical communication. So being able to communicate with a broad range of people out there on the internet is important. So if you want to become a better communicator, open source may be a way to do that. Intellectual property is also important, just kind of being able to pick a license and know the ramifications of what people can do with your software based on that. I think a large part of why Apple was able to take my software was it had a certain type of license that they could basically take the project, rebrand it, and do whatever they wanted to do with it. Also, swag is important. I've gotten many gym T-shirts from conferences or projects that I've been involved with. So as a company, open source work is important because it's a way to incentivize your current and future employees, right? If I'm a prospective employee looking at your company, I can take a look at what code you might have that's open, take a look at what frameworks you use, your development methodologies, maybe other things, like all the things that developers are fanatical about. And so, you might know that a company is going to be more of a fit based on what open source software that they have out there. Also really fosters an open culture at a company, because I'm constantly asking, why isn't this open? Like, why would we keep this proprietary if it's not something that we need to? Again, getting back to the things that are important, features are important. So we have a number of open source projects that we make available on GitHub. And so people are using our software, and they may be using it in different ways, and they can contribute those features back. And that has definitely happened over the years. The more people that are using your software, you're going to find your software or your libraries break in new and interesting ways based on how people are using your software. So, you might be using a particular, you might be using your library in very specific ways with specific sets of data, and somebody might come along and use it in an entirely different context. So, bugs may come out of that. Documentation, again, is important. So, being able to, your project as a company might be more readily adopted because the documentation's better, because people are able to get up to speed quicker by integrating your software because your documentation is better. Again, communication is important. There are people out there, if you have open source, again, they may not be paying for your software, but they are essentially customers. And if you do have professional services, or you do have an application, being able to interact with those people and kind of bring them in and communicate them might lead to actual support or money changing hands for your projects. And again, IP is important. You're asking yourself a lot as a company, is this something we need to worry about to keep proprietary? We've seen the rise of platforms as a service, so like the Rackspace of the world, kind of the open providers. And so there's this, they're building a lot of functionality that is kind of uniform and open across different platforms, but it's really the value add for what they do beyond that that's important. It's not necessarily the some of the underlying intellectual property. And again, swag is important to maybe people at conferences or meetups like this to just say thank you for contributing back to open source. And I think that's all I have. Pretty quick, but any questions? The most popular open source project that we have is around leaderboards, so being able to rank players that are competing in games. I'd have to go. I'd have to pull up on my phone, but I could see, over the different releases, how many stars or how many downloads it's had. But it's definitely our most popular project. Yeah, one. What was the question again?
Did you bring any swag with you?
I do have stickers, so yeah. If you do want a sticker, I've got that. One in the back. So what license do we use on our project? So we use MIT license, and I've used BSD license in the past, which is basically you can do anything you want with a project. I like to call it the don't call us, we won't call you license. So you can do anything with the project aside from maybe using the name without my permission.
One more question? No? Round of applause, thank you.